Hi everyone. Today we're going to be starting on the tea totes that are going to be the final project for this class. So I'm going to be walking you through the pattern in real time, and it might make for a heck of a long video, but I think it's useful to have someone knitting along with you. So we're going to go ahead and cast on 3 stitches. So you can see that there are 3 stitches on the needle. And now we're going to knit 3. So just knit into all of our cast on stitches. And then we're going to turn. We are going to knit through the front and back. So again, this is a little bit fiddly, but you'll get the hang of it. So that was a knit through the front and back. Now we're knitting 1. We knit through the front and back again. And we turn. So this part is the flap part of the tea tote. So we're trying to make it into a triangle. That's where we're increasing on the sides. We're going to knit across here. And then we're going to turn the work. And we're going to knit through the front and back again. And throughout the creation of the flap of the tea tote, we're going to see this used over and over. We're going to knit across, and when we get to the last one, we're knitting through the front and back again. So you can see here that the top, where we are now, has more stitches than the bottom, and that's because we've been increasing via the knit through the front and back. So now we're just going to knit across, and then we're going to turn the work. So again, we're going to be knitting through the front and back of this first stitch. Now this row is going to be a little bit tricky, so we're going to knit 1, we're then going to purl 3. So don't forget the yarn, the working yarn goes in front. So there's 3, and then we're going to knit, or I'm sorry, we're going to bind off 1 stitch purl-wise. All that means is that, again, according to the cast off, we are just bringing the second stitch from the tip of your right hand needle over the other one. So you just knit 1 after that, you knit through the front and back, and then you turn. So this is trying to make up the buttonhole of the top flap. So we're going to knit 4. So now what do we do? Because we've cast off that 1 stitch, so there's a space there, right? We have to bridge the gap somehow. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our long tail cast on. So you just kind of grab the yarn in the same way that you would with your regular cast on, and essentially all you're trying to do is make a loop. So we're going to do that twice to cast on 2 stitches. So again, wrapping it around your thumb and forefinger just like a regular long tail cast on, and then bringing your needle under the one on the thumb and then over the one that's on your index finger, and then pull it tight, and you can see that we've cast on 2 stitches, 2 more loops. Then we're going to knit 4, and then we're going to turn. So we'll continue our pattern. We're going to knit through the front and back. Again, we're still increasing. We're then going to knit 1. We're going to purl 6. Let's struggle in here a little bit because the newly cast on stitches are a little bit tight. Then we're going to knit 1. And then we're going to knit through the front and back again. And then we're going to turn the work. So you see we have a little buttonhole here. So it's just as easy as creating some space within these stitches. So we're just going to knit across this row. Perfect. So you can see that the flap is now taking shape. You can see the triangular shape because of our increased stitches. So again, I'm going to be knitting through the front and back. Then I'm going to be knitting 1 and purling. Then I'm going to be knitting 1 and then knit through the front and back and then turning the work. So we're going to keep doing that until we have 16 stitches across. And don't forget, after every knit through the front and back increased row, we're going to have kind of a stabilizing row of knitted stitches. That's so you don't get a lot of ugly holes and bumps by just increasing and increasing. And it also helps the angle of the work not look too steep. So again, we're knitting through the front and back to increase stitches. We're then knitting 1, and then we're purling 10, until we get to the last 2. We knit 1, and then we knit through the front and back again. So we're almost there. So let's turn the work. Now we're just going to knit across. And every few stitches, I have to kind of shuffle the work up a little bit now that it's getting longer. And for the final row, what we're going to do is we're going to knit 3, just regular knit, we're going to purl 10, and then we're going to knit 3 at the end. We're going to turn, and then we're going to just knit across. And so what we have now are the base stitches at the kind of fold of the flap that are going to continue to be knitted for another 36 rows. And what that's going to do for us is it's going to give us kind of a long rectangle after the flap, which is going to constitute the body of our tea tote. So since this is all the same, I'm going to just be speeding through this part and showing you a small clip, like a sped up clip of how this goes. So it's just the last 2 rows repeated, which is knit 3, purl 10, knit 3, turn, and then knit across. In the pattern, it says repeat the last 2 rows 18 times. So what that means is that you're going to be repeating, like I said, the knit 3, purl 10, knit 3, turn, knit across. You're going to be repeating those 2 rows 18 times, which means 36 rows. So let's go ahead and fast forward to the end of that section. Alright, so we've done all 36. I've knitted 3. Now I'm going to purl 3. Then I'm going to knit 4. I'm going to purl 3. Then I'm going to knit 3 and then turn. So that just makes a little purl ridge on the knitted side. You can kind of see it in this shot. It'll be clearer once you do the next section, which is just knit 3 rows. So you're going to knit here, and then turn it, and then knit, and then turn, and then knit. And the reason why I emphasize the 36 rows so much is because silly me was doing this at 4 in the morning, and I just did 18 rows and I finished the entire thing. So I actually had to go back and rip out the end of this project and then splice in the working yarn again and redo it from there. So I'll have some extra tails in the middle of my project. You'll see when we finish it up that I have to weave in. So that's where those came from. You're not supposed to have those. So I'm just going to continue knitting. This is my last knit row of the knit 3 rows section. There we go. So now I'm almost done. I'm going to knit 7 stitches. I'm missing stitches here. 5, 6, 7. Alright. And I'm going to turn it around, so don't go all the way to the end, just turn it around and knit right back across those 7. There we go. And then I'm going to knit 5. 4, 5. And then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to knit back again. Again, do not go all the way across the row. We're just going to straight up turn around and go back. And now we're going to do that with 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3. Perfect. And we're going to turn and knit back. Alright, we are very, very close to the end. We're going to just knit to the end of the row now. So just knit across all of the stitches. this is a technique called short rows, and it sounds more complicated than it is, but it's very aptly named. You're just turning around after you complete a certain number of stitches in the row instead of the full row. So it's a shorter row than it would normally be. And we're going to do the same with the other side. So again, we're going to be knitting 7, and then just turning around. 1, 4, 5. Okay, just needed to make sure that there were 7 there. And then we're going to just turn around and knit back right across those 7 stitches. And what this is doing is it's creating that indent on the top of the envelope part that the pattern calls for. So we're going to knit 5, and then we're going to turn around, and then we're going to turn around. We're going to knit 3, and turn around, and this is our final turn, so we're going to just knit those last 3 back. And congratulations, we're all done knitting. We just have to bind off. So again, we're just going to knit 1 stitch, knit the next stitch, and then bring the first one over. Knit and bring the first one over. And we're going to do that all the way across the row until we get to the last stitch. And the reason you see the post-its in the background is because I had lost count before, so I just ended up keeping a little tally of when I was done with my 36. So we're just going to cut off the working yarn. And I'm sorry this is so blurry, but we're just pulling that string through the last loop that was on the knitting needle. You can do that with a needle, you can do that with a tapestry needle. And so as you can see, it's kind of curled up a little bit. My tension is a little off. I was a little tense when I was knitting this because I had to hold up the work to the camera, so I was just gripping it a lot. So you can see how our knit 3 every row made these ridges on the sides and the top and the bottom, and that's actually called a garter stitch. And we're just going to weave in my mistake here. This is where I had to tie some yarn together to the original yarn to continue the Tea Tote because I messed up so much and I stopped early. So this is just another way of weaving in the ends on the garter side. Sometimes I prefer to do this instead of the first way that I showed on the knit side. So it's just following one of the garter stitches up and down through the backs of the purl stitch. There we go. This is an unnecessary amount of that. So I'm just going to stretch it a little and then cut the yarn And there we go. Looks like nothing ever happened. You can kind of see the knot a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. It's going to be on the inside. So we're going to weave in the actual end. So let me just thread this through my tapestry needle. These are also called darning needles because they can be used to darn socks. Alright, so this is a little bit trickier because I don't really know, I can't see where the point is of the pointy parts in this. So I'm just gonna guess. And again, with a garter stitch, it's a little bit harder to see where you're gonna be able to follow a stitch thread in order to weave in the ends. So I kind of just was winging it. There's no rhyme or reason to this. I tried to hide the stitch as best I could without pulling the tip here like down into the knitting. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is just not grip it too tight or not pull the thread too tight so that the tip of my little indent disappears or gets scrunched down into the rest of the piece. So again, I'm just trying to hide the yarn wherever I can. I'm sure there's a nicer, neater way to do this with garter stitch, but I've honestly never noticed too big of a difference when I do it this way, especially for such a small project. It's gonna get sewn together on the sides anyway, and I'm just not too worried about seeing a lot of this yarn end in the garter rows. Just gonna try to tuck in a little bit more. I'm kind of sewing up the side of the buttonhole. I don't know if I did something wrong, but the side of the buttonhole seemed too loose, so I wanted to try to get those two rows together a little bit more. And there you have it. So this is the finished knitted piece of the Tea Tote. And so what I'm doing here is it's quite curled up on itself, but I wanted to show you how we're going to end up sewing the edges down. So this is, let me just kind of get this to a place where I wanted it to be, but we're just going to sew the edges down, and then we're going to sew a button to the front flap, to the front body of the Tea Tote so that it goes through the buttonhole, and there you have it. That's your Tea Tote. You can watch the Knitting with Intention video for instructions on blocking and sewing up the sides or doing some decorative stuff, but really you just have to sew up the sides of this and add a button and you're good to go. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.